Ladies and gentlemen of the crypto space, we're live on a Friday, February 2nd at 11:30 a.m. There's a couple of stories that I'm going to try and get out today. And obviously the title of the stream is Airdrops and Money. So incentives, we go as far as talking about rationing and the nature of money, and I'll try and not get that far down the rabbit hole. But we could start with a very obvious thing. Capital allocation to crypto markets is for a couple reasons. First and foremost, accessibility. Typically in TradFi, in meat space finance, pretty much everyone that interacts with crypto markets would have zero capacity to invest accordingly. Accredited investor rules mean you literally have no access to invest in $250,000, $500,000, $1 million, $5 million, $10 million types of capitalized projects. It's just not going to happen. You just don't have that kind of network. You don't have that kind of access. So that is first and foremost why crypto markets are quite tantalizing, exciting, and why people engage with them. Now, to take it to a whole nother level, you have the concept of an airdrop, which is akin to share issuance, but shared distribution to parties that have shown some kind of alignment. And that alignment, every time there's a new airdrop, is tested in different ways, getting people to do chores and tasks, or airdropping to persons that have already shown alignment to another protocol, another group of protocols. And that way, when the airdrop occurs, there is a greater likelihood of of alignment with the protocol, and lack of dumping, which basically means mercenary capital is minimized and confidence is greater. The less selling, the more confidence. So it's very interesting why the price action of many assets occurs. And that is what I like to understand. That is what I like to inspect. And you could chase that price action. You could chase that group of people that engage with crypto markets because they can't engage in meat space venture capital. You could chase that price action, that appreciation that is triggered by their behavior, and that's okay. And that's not a bad thing at all. It's player versus player, and you're going to have to rotate. You're going to have to understand the technicals. You're going to have to understand what is the hot narrative and how it tops. And when it tops, everyone loses interest. Uh, the most recent one, two, is Solana and Tia, and they clearly topped. Tia topped at 20 and retraced down to 16 and change, and is at a very nice price point currently, 17.8. Sol went down, topped at 120, down to 84, give or take. It's back up to 100, but it doesn't have that breadth of movement to the upside. It doesn't have that ferocious inflow, and that is a changing market dynamic. That hot ball of money has rotated onto smaller cap assets, excuse me, smaller cap assets that can outperform to the upside to a greater degree. That capital has moved on to airdrop farming, where you're literally getting a free dilutive distribution, and mercenary capital is tested. And that worked out very well with TIA, by the way. There wasn't a lot of mercenary capital. It's the only reason you could account for such price appreciation with such a large airdrop. It was a very interesting alignment of the participants, and that's very rare. And we're seeing that very much the case for a lot of the protocols on Cosmos hubs. And that's definitely a good thing to see for the entire network of networks. Um, so all of this, everything I just described in this introduction, let me pop over a screen, pop it over to the main screen, and we'll continue talking. So everything I just talked about reduces to incentives. What is the incentive? Clearly, price appreciation is an incentive. It incentivizes behavior. So the better alignment actors have with the protocol, The greater the price appreciation, the greater the incentive for the capital to flow in. So price appreciation unto itself is an incentive. Airdrops clearly an incentive to engage, to deploy capital, to spend time and effort, and all of that counts for uh, accounts toward contributing to confidence, and confidence, greater alignment of confidence affects price appreciation as well. Confidence means less sellers, more buyers. Price goes up. Price goes up, drives in capital. So literally, there's such a directionality with these relatively low market cap assets because it doesn't take much capital to cause that price appreciation, and price appreciation causes price appreciation. It's quite fascinating. They're very fragile markets. They could flip directions very quickly. And that's exactly why we see the volatility that we do. And that's why Bitcoiners talk about as the price appreciates into the hundreds of thousands or the millions of dollars per coin, you'll get that lower volatility. And it makes perfect sense. But the world is getting weird because we see that kind of hyper volatility with the macro cap assets and equity markets nowadays. So you can say all of these things that I'm saying about how the volatility will subside over time as the market cap increases, but that might make sense on paper, but it doesn't overwhelmingly seem like it plays out because that theory is kind of tested very much with these half $1 trillion, equity assets, $1 trillion equity assets. Mag 7 is crazy, that volatility. So in any regard, money. That is the biggest narrative in these crypto markets, and it's not, everything reduces to it. So it's not this DA, data availability. It's not the throughput of transactions per second. Those are all knock-on effects from a capacity for a network to incentivize actors to engage with the network, to participate from a functionality standpoint, from a community standpoint. I'm not too big on community, albeit it is clearly very effective at influencing price action. In fact, in many regards, it's very critical because community is directly correlated to confidence, um, but it's not as quantifiable. It's indirectly quantifiable. You're scanning social media. You're assessing the vibe. You're looking for the searches. So it's very deductive. You're inspecting and looking for confluence, suggesting the community is strong, and that is certainly a way to inspect the potential price action for an asset. But I prefer products and services, and to me, that's my right curve perspective on inspecting protocols and networks for why there would be confidence and confidence leading towards price appreciation. And I need that kind of quantifiable um, attribute set in order to engage. Whether that's a curse or a blessing, it's proven productive thus far. It's certainly not as productive as many folks that I know that have a capacity to qualitatively assess the confidence of a community, and that's one hell of a skill set. Certainly a skill set, and I'm not too good at that skill set, but I'm surely good at quantifying the capacity for a network and the capacity for a protocol to provide a product and service, and that clearly engages. And what is that product or service? It's credit, and it's foreign exchange. And foreign exchange is to a degree the AMMs, but it's also cross-chain technology. So that's why Cosmos hubs are hot with IBC. That's crazy. It's all cross-chain, so it's seamless, and there's transaction fees involved, and to me, that exposure will probably manifest back towards Atom and Cosmos, the root chain. Um, I look forward to seeing how those governance proposals evolve, and that would be an interesting destination for capital to flow, given what Atom started. Um, so, from a credit perspective, the pinnacle of what's coming soon is Fractal. I rarely talk about protocols, but I feel this is the time for the hot protocols to be talked about. And three come to mind: Fractal, Convergence, and Conic with its V2 is back. So never really had too much. It had the headline effect of its V1 and what occurred, but it wasn't a death blow. And it has backing, it has community, and surely has a lot of capital deployed very quickly post V2 launch. So that's very interesting. So Conic is an interesting one. I acquired a rare position. I rarely acquire positions, but Conic was enough for me to acquire that position. And it has a very instrumental function part of the Curve Federation. Uh, the notion of seamless cross-chain liquidity is clearly prefaced by the capacity for liquidity to be seamless, not cross-chain. You need to smooth liquidity and you need to deploy it efficiently across what has become known as pools, but the meta pools of the pools. So the requirement or the opportunity to arbitrage those pools to balance the pools is a big deal with regard to the smoothness of the liquidity topography. And then that's meaningful with the capacity for the liquidity to service the demand placed on it by the network of actors. Um, so what we're seeing is a constant evolution of the capacity for liquidity across, well, in networks and also across networks to be smoothed. And this is literally what occurs in meat space behind the scenes. This is what the banks do. This is literally what the Fed does, and what QE is, and the capacity to add or remove liquidity from the system. And we're not talking about the most recent perversions with lending at par with the BTFP. It's clearly part of the liquidity equation. We haven't gotten that perverted. We don't have that kind of centralized authoritarian type of intervention potential in crypto markets. But what we share is that smoothness of the liquidity profile is a benefit, is a boon on the capacity for a market to service the demand. And the demand is ultimately for credit, and credit facilitates the expansion of liquidity from an endogenous perspective. And that is certainly a valid inspection of these crypto markets, the endogenous versus the exogenous, and inspecting from an emerging market perspective. So all of this, everything I talked about are just components of a financial system, emerging market. And we have these flows to and from emerging markets. And literally, I'm talking about meat space right now, but we have that in these crypto markets. So this is a microcosmos, a micro ecosystem of emerging markets. It's literally like looking at a country on the map and seeing hundreds and hundreds of economies within those borders. That's the inspection to make, and that is certainly the case. Um, I always love to remind folks about what money is and what you're chasing, but I don't like to beat a dead horse too much. I think the biggest takeaway from this introduction is the reductionist perspective and how it's all the same thing, playing on free money, an airdrop, and free is a big incentive. And then after the airdrop occurs, you inspect the um, alignment of the vested interest. Whomever received the airdrop are more selling than holding, and that'll tell you whether there's a strong ecosystem to emerge from that airdrop. And at this point, that is certainly the case for Celestia. I think that's quantitative. Look at this price point. I don't see it going back down to $2 from where it is. There's too much alignment between the actors, and that's refreshing. You don't need to have exposure to what is hot. I don't have exposure to Celesta, but I have plenty of exposure to countless protocols that could benefit from its functionality on Cosmos hubs and off Cosmos hubs because everything is going seamless cross-chain. It will all be smoothed out. Now, liquidity is not the only thing that needs to be smoothed out in crypto markets. It's also messaging. And that's the interaction of one contract on one chain with another contract on another chain. And in that regard, everything uses Celestia. But Celestia isn't the end all be all of data availability. There's plenty of it. And clearly, there's even argument to use mainnet, Ethereum mainnet call data. It's expensive. But there's a reason why that would be preferred for many actors, large actors that don't give a shit about the cost. And you can even use Bitcoin, which is even more expensive and slow as shit. And that's the whole concept of ordinals, which is basically the concept of an NFT, something that is non-fungible and immutable. And then you can inspect the degree of security related to the immutability. And these are all great conversations, and we'll see how it'll unfold. And ultimately, you'll have a competitive market with varying degrees of security and cost associated with that security, and varying degrees of decentralization, which plays into the capacity of a network to protect the immutability of desired data. So Fractal is going to be a DA layer. What else? What else? Near is that doesn't have much hype around it. So great tech. Near is faster than Celestia, to my understanding, significantly faster, significantly cheaper. But great tech isn't always the greatest investment. So that's why the community inspection is meaningful to a great extent. You have great tech and it just never catches a bid ever. So it doesn't make it a good investment. Um, Anywho, interesting thoughts. And when you reduce the complexity to these fundamental things, you realize it's all the same, everything. And that's exactly why my reduction from an investment management perspective is X, Y, and Z, APR. Clearly appreciation from a trading perspective, but that's active income versus passive income. And with the passive income, with the APR perspective, you got residential, you have literally a retail store, and you have ownership of these businesses that have products and services that produce an APR. It's all the same. And from the APR perspective, you could then make the best possible decisions on the composition of your portfolio. So there's APRs everywhere. Kind of look like it's going to be interesting from an APR perspective. It was very interesting the first time around. How are the crypto markets doing today? Curve hovering at 445, and I'm well under 10. Frax over 10. That's interesting to see if Frax holds 10. It looks ridiculous from a chart perspective. Maybe that's an Adam and Eve of sorts. I don't know. Whatever. It's well above the time weighted average price on the monthly, and that's comforting in many regards. Dot's very strong too. The unsung or the untalked about chain of chains with a not centralized because Dot is decentralized, but it has centralized consensus. That's something that no other network shares, something that Cosmos hubs don't share. And that's very interesting. So what they needed was the parachains to go live and the parachain auctions, and there's parachains out there now. And Astar and Sora have their parachains. That's interesting. Very, very interesting. Um, doesn't have the it has community, but it doesn't have that hot narrative, and that's why the price action is where it is. But look, it looks strong from a price action perspective, above the time weighted average price on the monthly. That's hot. Phantom is kind of go it alone. It doesn't have a network of networks, doesn't have the optimism and all the whatever it does, and the subnets of Avalanche and the chains of Cosmos. It doesn't have that capacity, but it has the speed. So, Phantom in many regards is like functionally the similar story as Solana, like it's ridiculously fast. It just doesn't have the depth of liquidity at all, and it doesn't have maybe it has doesn't have the strength of the community still. All I know is from a price action perspective, breeds confidence, and Solana ripping 10x off the bottom breeds more confidence than Phantom being down where it is. Listen, if Phantom was at $3, it would be a completely different story right about now. Interesting stuff. Where's Stacks and Alex still holding on? I mean, look at that, down 50%, up 11x on the money and down 50%. Because that's one, there's nothing to do on the damn network. Jesus. All it is bullshit BRC20s. Anyway, Brian, happy Friday, damn morning. Shish, happy Friday, buddy. Crypto 2 Noah with hat. I got to get hat. My man. that stuff's dead on Solana right about now, but that was a fun run. Can you please talk about Conic and how it differs from other protocols? I don't quite understand the full value prop of what they offer. Well, I believe I talked about it to a degree thus far. Seamless liquidity, or the capacity uh, to reallocate and smooth, well, reallocate with the intent to smooth the liquidity profile across pools and meta pools. That was a big thing. You remember when there was a time when Curve didn't have meta pools, and that was a big innovation because now you can take a pool and put it as a component of another pool. And what you need is, and I talked about at the end of 2021, was seamless liquidity provisioning. There's been a couple of protocols that have talked about that. You remember OneRing? They're still around. But the capacity to take liquidity and arbitrage and do it programmatically using contracts is a big deal because that's done by mevbots and extracting and arbitraging and extracting that capital. But that'd be nice if that was done in an automated way where that arbitrage is revenue of a business distributed to owners. So that in many regards is what Conic has a capacity to be. And that's what it's doing. It's smoothing the liquidity profile across pools and meta pools. And that's a big deal, especially because it has an incentive layer attached. So it's also driving liquidity into those LPs. Interesting stuff. That's as simple as it is. Reductionist perspective. Um, and it's going to take not just Conic, it'll take more. It takes more and more and more protocols and more businesses. And the market's not even hot. Imagine when the market's hot. The market gets hot for a year or two. You're going to have many protocols trying to get in on that business model of seamless, transparent liquidity provisioning. Here's my USDC. Go ahead and deploy it to LPs. Do what you need to do and make me money. Make me an APR. And we're not talking about just an incentivized APR, a productive APR by arbitraging the damn pools. And that's an interesting business. Arbitrage. Hope that helps. Also, same with convergence. Convergence, I don't fully understand, but uh, an LSD black hole is high level terminology I've heard, and that's cool. Which is similar to staked out, but obviously convergence, I believe, is accumulating staked out assets as well. So, but this is generally my perspective is there is no end to that rabbit hole. You bringing on a new incentive regime and you accumulate whatever the hell you want. So this never existed before in traditional finance because you couldn't issue assets, you couldn't issue securities and stocks like this to drive and give them away. So it's a whole new realm of financial inspection. You need to understand the behavioral effects of these, because you could always just spin up a new incentive regime, and that'll drive Bitcoiners nuts. But that's a fundamental component of human nature, incentives, what is exciting, what is new, and there's going to always be a new way to provide a product and service to fill a void. Seamless cross-chain liquidity. Okay, turn into a business and arbitrage on chain and distribute the revenues. Because that's clearly a private business, what the mevbots do. So make it public and make it deterministic, and then make it immutable. And then someone else will see that business as pulling in 10 mil a year, and they're like, all right, let's do it better. Then you have competition. And all the while, they have their own asset. So they're driving capital to their protocol. And then you have the cyclicality, where yields will vary over time depending on market conditions. So the capital deployed to one protocol versus another will go back and forth to one protocol, to another protocol, to another protocol. And then Darwin kicks in. You have survival of the fittest. So it's similar yet different mechanics to meat space. How these types of assets, you know, equity, ownership, that's not what these tokens are. That's not what crypto tokens are. It's not equity. And frankly, equities aren't what equities are anymore. You don't own shit with a stupid equity from the stock market. You own nothing. And if you think you own something, go and try and exercise that control by voting, and you realize you literally own nothing. And the paltry dividends are merely a, a token. It's a bullshit. It's placation. Oh, here's your bullshit revenue. Thank you for not dumping our stock. At 1%, 2%, or whatever the hell average dividend yields are, prevailing dividend yields. Um, so anyway, that's my thought. Hope that helps. Good morning, Cab George. How are you? Are you planning to relock your FXS prior to fractional launch? I periodically lock. I have a business policy that anything I currently have locked must be periodically locked. And when I say a business policy, it's a requirement for me to comply with this document that states business rules. So that is a requirement. I don't. My locks do not decrease in or decay too much. I usually relog it once a month, once every 2 months, pretty much everything. Um, and that'll probably be Aura as well. I don't think I have a capacity to deviate from a business rule. I'd have to explain it and probably explain it on paper, and that's not something I really want to do because that introduces doubt into the business rule. And frankly, for a variety of reasons, it is very important for me to uphold that business rule and not deviate from it. Hope that helps. That's an interesting one because that has to do with business structure and it allows me or it substantiates a lot of behavior that I do with regard to the portfolio. Snow, good afternoon from Europe. Mr. Captain, have you heard about Eigenlayer? What are your thoughts on CBDCs? Well, it's two very different things. So Eigenlayer is very interesting, and I think there's going to be a lot of derivatives based on it or consuming it. Um, I I don't think there's a need to necessarily do things directly with it because the derivatives are just going to encapsulate its functionality for you. So Eigenlayer is interesting, to say the least. Incentives and the concept of restaking, so on and so forth. It's a big thing. What is restaking? Restaking is proving your vested interest, proving alignment with the community and the protocols. Uh, so all of it's heading in a very interesting direction where these types of assets and restaking and there is no frickin' community with equities, and that's exactly why GameStop appeared to be an anomaly. There was a community of people that shared the same idea, and and that's why Tesla is what it is. That's what the community, and that's what a lot of the financial folks criticize. Like, oh, it's Tesla. But for the people that are the investors that share that community sentiment, That's a big thing to be part of a community. Now, I think there's more potential for that type of behavior in crypto markets, and we clearly see that. Smaller cap assets are going to be increasingly volatile. CBDCs are another story. It's pretty scary. Not much we could do. You'd need a lot of weight to influence the desire for a nation state to deploy a money or a settlement currency with that kind of capital control potential. And I think they're coming because it makes sense. It's the only thing they can do. Uh, the one thing I know is that when shit hits the fan, social civility will be financed. And that's exactly why the banks were bailed out in March of 2023. That's why the banks were bailed out in September of 2019. That's why they tried to do whatever the fuck they tried to do in 2020. And I don't know, that was a complete disaster. They literally tried to bail out small business for the first time in history. And it was a complete disaster, the PPP program. Jesus Christ. It was literally a disaster. And it is notable that they tried to bail out small business, which they've never, ever, ever done before. But could they fail any worse? I don't think they could have failed any worse. It was just ridiculous. Anywho, so, I mean, clearly CBDCs cure all of those complexities. You could literally have you could literally have a rebasing. You have an account, and you could just update the balances in those accounts. So you could distribute stimulus, you could take away capital, you could force payment, you could restrict payment, you could do whatever the hell you want. So it's interesting from a government perspective, and you clearly see that everyone wants it because it's not so easy to finance social stability when your balance sheet is not capable of financing it anymore. And that's basically where the U.S. is. Pretty sure Biden has said publicly the world's not going to look the same in 4 years. And I think we've seen so many tip of the hands, little Freudian slips to a degree of what's coming. And it's stuff to be weary of, but whatever. What are you going to do? Serenity now. Simple as that. Can't do anything about it. Worry about the things that you can um, affect, the things that you can make decisions about. We greatly appreciate your humility and intellectual generosity. You're welcome, Snoke. I tried my best. You guys helped me too. Who else am I going to talk to like this? And who else would take an interest in this kind of conversation? Bill. Bill's in the house. Hey, Bill. Hey, Cap. I'm a little late, so apologies if this is answered lately. Are you partaking in the L0 Eigenlager and Z? No, I'm not interested in any of that. Next up for me is Fraxler, which is coming really soon. I'm interested in Dimension when that thing goes live. That's pretty cool. I took an interest in Conix relaunch. Um, I'm interested in money. Go figure. I'm interested in money. But it's what is money? You have to understand what is money to understand why I'm interested in these particular protocols. So it's just something that my right curve is requires to allocate capital, like data availability. That's going to be endlessly competitive. Solana has data availability. It's all data availability. Every blockchain has a capacity to store data, and now even Bitcoin with Taproot. So even before Tap, you could store data in the what was it, the, the output or whatever it was called. I forget. Um, so DA is nothing new. It's just hot because there was a fat airdrop. So airdrops drive narrative because it's free money. And it's a great way to test community. It's good to see Tia up at 1782. Showing strength. That's great community. Not something I would want to own though. What, own 10 of them? $170? 50 of them? Spend $1,000 on Tia just to get other airdrops? Great. Yeah, got plenty of coverage already. I got my Adam and Osmo from years ago. We're four years into those protocols, and now all of a sudden things on Cosmos hubs are hot. That's cool. It's good to see. It's finally the case. I don't need to chase it though. So just like you say, Bill, am I interested in those things? Yes. I don't need to be allocating to them because what they end up doing, the effect that they end up having, is going to have an impact on things that I already have exposure to. Hope that helps. Bill, Snoke, Pleasure, Gazika in the house. CVG is next level Ponzi. Yes, it is. It's a Ponzi. I don't like that word. It's an incentive regime on top of an incentive regime on top of an incentive regime. It's level three. It's level three curve federation. So first level is obviously CRV and its incentives, and then you have convex and stake DAO and everyone else accumulating, and then you have those that are now applying an incentive regime to level two. So it's level three. Boom. There you go. Level three curve federation. And I think it'll keep. I think that'll keep going. And that's fine because that's literally based on the rules of humanity and how humans want something new. And they need incentives to drive behavior. And you could have branding and marketing and memes to drive community. And that contributes to competitiveness. And the nature of reality is cyclicality. So you have one protocol that's hot, then another protocol that's hot. Then it goes back to the first protocol that's hot because it was the first protocol. And then it just goes back, it just goes around and around and around. Humans have a short attention span. And that cyclicality is built into our programming. Um, Wondering, forgot about them. Yeah, they're still around. Who do they dominate? Was it one of the three by threes? Velodrome. They have very large governance capacity over the three by threes on, I'm pretty sure, Optimism and Arbitrum at this point. I think they relaunched their token on Arbitrum. Yeah, it was the new year they were relaunching their token on Arbitrum. So, I mean, they're doing it right from a three by three perspective, acquiring governance power. That's is what it is. I don't follow it too closely, but huh, whatever happens, it happens. And in the end, all of this is a giant punt. Snoke, yes, indeed, George. It's a never-ending positive. It is. It's all about confidence, and the, to reduce it all, you all have to understand what money is, because none of it means anything without um, services, and that means it's an incentive to incentivize behavior. You're paying for a service, so you're incentivizing that person to do work for compensation, and that compensation is supported because that capital can be used to acquire natural resources, consumer staples, food, and energy. So all of this, everything, especially crypto, all the way down to dollars, is a way to ration limited natural resources. Look, we're ending on the point that I said earlier that I mention all too often that I didn't want to mention, but we're ending on that note. All of this is a game of rationing food and energy and building materials, natural resources, consumer staples. There's a limited supply of that stuff. Clearly, if you have a warehouse, a personal warehouse, or a shed filled with 5 years worth of food, you don't need to buy food. You got food. You have a forest in your backyard. You don't need to buy lumber. You got lumber. You could build a house. And then what's the need for money? Well, what would you need money for if you have the natural resources that you need? If you have 5 cows and you literally can produce a gallon of milk a day, you don't need to go to the supermarket for milk. Um, If you have 5 acres of wheat out back, you can make cereal and pasta. Sure as hell don't need to go to the supermarket to buy those types of products. So think about that. That's an interesting one. Um, where money, what kind of situation would you need to have for money to just be stupid, to not be needed? And that's why money is meaningful because it substitutes the need for a 5 acre field of wheat for a water tower on your roof. So you collect rainwater and you store rainwater and you pay taxes. So the local municipality has builds reservoirs and lays piping and has industrial filtration. So you're paying for that. So, but you could do that, and then you don't need money, and then you could live in a place where there's no municipality. But that's not the case. So you can see that perspective as being very meaningful. There's plenty of ways to explain this situation where you don't need money. So that's what money serves as a capacity to replace those things, outsource them, and one of the biggest outsourcings is that of labor. When you hire a contractor, you could do that work. You go nowadays, especially. In fact, I'm doing that right about now upstairs. I go on YouTube and you look up plumbing, and nowadays it's a lot of PEX and the clamps and the sleeves and the shark bites and drywall's freaking easy and plaster's pretty easy and so the piping's easy and the electrical is even easier. Anyway, it's a fun little digression at the end and just learned about 12 gauge. You could run 110, 220, up to big 240 volts, and 14 gauge. You're not gonna get your 200s. Um, so I was very tempted to swap over to 200s for a 12 gauge wire that I had, and I just didn't want to swap out the fuse in the box. But it's interesting stuff. You could do your own wiring. It's not hard. Cut down the sheetrock in your walls, buy some sheetrock, and run some wires. And frankly, plumbing is a big one. Replace the damn plumbing. The contractors cost way too much money. Figure out how to do that shit yourself, and you save an absolute fortune. Digression. I know. I know. Last couple of questions. Do you know how to write Solidity or Viper? Sure. Solidity is relatively straightforward. It's relatively fundamental compared to Viper. Viper's uh, it's very much higher level. And but what do you want to do with it? How do you feel about AI development? Still worth learning and programming. Okay, so we'll end on this note. Um, like careers and stuff. Where's software heading? So Kotlin's still a hot industry. It's my industry. Java, you don't code in Android in Java anymore. Swift is still big on iOS, but Dart and Flutter is big. It's much bigger than it used to be a couple years ago. So Dart's a big language to understand, and I think there's a market for it. If you learn Kotlin and Swift, there's many more years to come for that industry because there's all this vested interest by corporations, all the applications that are currently available. And yeah, you could do your cross chain, but there's something that the larger corporations, they'll want their separate departments for iOS and Android. So each of those languages are great and there's big careers for them. AI is another story where AI is heading. It's going to make it very difficult for entry level engineering. I mean, AI kind of eliminates the need for entry level engineering. Because the only thing that he can't do with AI is have experience, which obviously will be cured at some point in the future. And there goes my job. Because literally, everything about my job reduces to experience 15 years of the Android ecosystem. Other than that, the software could write the software nowadays. Um, or Solidity and Viper, maybe Solidity more because EVM has dominated. EVM has won in many regards. But the I think Solidity is a big industry going forward. There's no reason not to learn it if you have that capacity to do it yourself as an autodidact, or you could have institutional exposure. So if you go to school for programming, you probably want to learn Solidity. Um, but I like the high level stuff, user interfaces, and like React Native drives me nuts. Or I don't like web development, like Web 2 browsers. I don't like React, and React Native is just it's such a similar JavaScript type of implementation. It's just I like strictly typing things, and I hate globals and scope and modularization, and it's just not something that's inherent to those languages as compared to Java centric. Um, Anywho, that's just a little personal sentiment applied to what interests me the most. But these are all big languages to learn, and you can be very productive and have pretty good careers, at least for the coming decade. I mean, things will change in the next 5 to 10 years, and things will start to radically change in a 10-year time horizon at this pace. AI is going to disrupt a lot of this. Hope that helps. What are your plans with CNC and CTR, these cap gains positions? I don't think so. I have too much of a benefit when I'm able to lock something for a duration. I have very personal arguments that I make from a business perspective with regard to fair market value and permanently locking things. It changes a lot of the equation, and the more I'm consistent with that kind of interpretation, the more I'm able to justify that kind of management approach. So I'm inclined to think this will become permanently locked positions. And, I look forward to that being proven right. And what does that mean? What do I mean? In the coming years, let's say 5, 10 years down the road, I look back and the inspection isn't total portfolio value. And it's just a very contrarian take because so many folks look at your all-time high, or what is the next all-time high for Bitcoin? It's going to 250,000 or 500,000. I don't give a shit about all-time highs. Being a contrarian, I'm like, what's the next low? That's what I want to know because that tells me the structure of the market. So I look forward to maybe 5, 10 years down the road, and the inspection for me to make is how much revenue did I make in fiscal 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27? And everything else was just noise. Price action was just noise. And then all that matters is that what I own becomes entrenched, becomes needed industry, becomes successful businesses. And then the revenue that is generated will fluctuate over time, and you'll see a chart pattern, just like the price action of a chart. So the revenue will be up, it'll be down, it'll be up, it'll be down, and hopefully there's higher lows and higher highs, but it'll be cyclical. And then I can look back in 20, 30 years, 40 years, when I'm 70, 80 years old, and exactly what I said was the case. You click a claim button once a week, and then you go on a trip to Paris. So that'd be nice, and if that's right, and I will surely, I am guaranteed to find out if I'm right or wrong because of the business policy to permanently lock, as well as the nature of the protocol to lock. We'll see. Brian, the majority of things really hurting is entry-level programming jobs with AI. Getting projects on GitHub to show and being able to talk through those is key. Yeah, talk about that for a second. That was my whole jump start for my career. Back in '08, '09, there was literally worlds coming out of catastrophe from a financial perspective. And I went to school for electrical engineering, and there was no work whatsoever. There was literally zero work. I did a lot of pizza delivery out of college. And then Android and iOS, Apple and Google started doing what they started doing, and I was programming, learning to program at a call center. I was doing tech support for a credit card company at the time, and I wrote my first apps, and then I wrote more apps, and then I wrote more apps. I did that for a couple of years. They were very successful apps. I wrote My first app was called Shady SMS. It was one of the first 100 Android apps. It was less than 100 apps on the, was it the Play Store? Was the Google App Store? I don't even remember at this point, so long ago. It was one of the first 100 apps on Android. What was it? Handset was one of the first text messaging apps all those years ago. It's a different world back then, but that's where I started. I wrote a lot of apps, and I had my GitHub, and that's how I got my first job. I I look back, and I would have never hired myself. I was so unqualified for that first job. Um, that's an interesting one. Was that a grandfather paradox for a career? I would never hire myself. But that was my first job. I literally went to the interview with like GitHub links. Like here, I could be productive. I could be a useful human being. And then I got my first job. Once you get your first job, then your job is your selling point. I worked here. And then once you get like two, three, four jobs under your belt, it's like it's easy to get work. Chicken and the egg situation. I remember before all this, back in like '06, '05, '06, that I was it was the similar thing trying to get a different job, and literally the secretary slash HR was like, yeah, chicken and the egg, and I was like, yeah, chicken and the egg. So I complicated. Killis is in the house. Much a pleasure. Used to be called Android Market. The Android Market. That's right. The little green one. Oh my. Did you know back in the day on Android, this is why my application was so successful, that you could do a broadcast receiver and set its priority to max int and intercept incoming SMS to the phone and abort the broadcast. What does that mean? That basically means the phone receives an SMS, your application intercepts it, and then aborts it from being transmitted downstream to any other applications, including the system. The system text messenger never received the SMSs. So shady SMS. So I was able to override the entire Android system and block messages and intercept messages and make messages hidden. And this services on Android, you could literally, the second you installed an app, the services were running. Nowadays, when you install an app, you literally have to click it to start services, which all this makes sense now. But back then, you could do crazy things like intercepting text messages. That was wild. Yeah, right. But it doesn't work the same anymore. But those were my apps. I did like three versions of Shady SMS. I built this thing called Vegas SMS. That was really good. I don't know why I called it Vegas. And then I built one called I don't even remember, material messaging, I think it was called. I don't know. I don't think so. I tried to make a text messaging application, but nowadays these are all old technologies. You talk to the kids, what's a text message? But SMS was a big deal, and MMS was it was very complicated. Back when I did, I'm literally ending this call and talking about my career. I literally dumped the MMS databases on Android to inspect the headers to understand how the hell the MMS actually worked. And I remember one time getting through to like engineering at T-Mobile, and I was having conversations with him because I was having difficulty processing the payload for an MMS message, and it was actually quite constructive. And I think that went into Vegas SMS, and that was my last product. And I was very much doing like processing of MMS blob data, breaking down the binary data to deserialize and just digest it and extract the different components. You have to find the MIME types to know whether it's text or an image, so on and so forth. And then it was just then you lo and behold, every damn carrier did MMS differently, so it was a complete disaster. And now you have new messaging systems that are a whole nother level. Anyway, that those are fun memories from a long career at this point. Everyone, I appreciate your time because as much as we talk about crypto, uh, you guys listen to me, and it's a good experience, and I thank you for letting me vent and letting me talk about my experiences with this craziness we call crypto. Friday, February 2nd at 12:26 p.m. 28 people made it to the end of the stream. 7 likes. Smack that thumbs up button. I appreciate each and every one of you. Tell everyone to subscribe. Link in the description for the most rational community in the entire crypto space. Y'all have a wonderful weekend now, and I will catch you next week. Peace.